Fran, do you remember the first time you read a quilt pattern? Did you feel like you were in a foreign country?
Oh my goodness, yes. And I was going, now what does that mean? And what does that mean? It would be really helpful if someone would have shared some information with me.
Why don't we do that now? Keep watching. Hi, it's Donna Robertson
And Fran Morgan with Fabric Cafe.
and we are so glad that you joined us today. We're going to do a little bit of reminiscing to start with. I remember my first quilt, and of course that was the baby quilt, but then I decided to graduate to a real quilt, and I went to the store and I spent hours trying to pick out the fabric, and I spent hours because I'd pick out 3 or 4 fabrics and then I couldn't find 5 and 6. And I bought this ton of fabric, and when I finished making the quilt, I had enough fabric left over. I could have made a second quilt.
My.
Yeah, it was pretty complicated. And I think that's what really inspired Fran and me to come up with the concept of 3-yard quilts. They are so super simple to follow.
They really are. They really, really are. And I know that my first attempt at a quilt as well, I was trying to use scissors to cut my blocks out. I didn't know anything. So that was one of those, it was like just learning all the simple basic things that you don't even realize you don't know.
Right. And so we've come up with the 3-yard quilt terminology sheet, and it's free on our website, fabriccafe.com, and you'll find it under the free goodies tab. And today we're going to go through this terminology and help you to familiarize yourself with the different things that you're going to hear when you're quilting. So we're going to get started with showing you a quilt. And we refer to these quilts as economy quilts. Remember I said I bought a lot of fabric and then I had a whole lot left over. I wanted to come up with a quilt that you could utilize the fabric that you had without having a ton left over. And so we've created patterns that use 3 1-yard quilts. We call them economy quilts because the price tag is great for just 3 yards and to get something this beautiful. So let's put this up on the table. And then what we did is we created 3 different positions for the fabrics. We have a focus fabric, a light fabric, and a dark fabric. And when you look at the patterns, you're going to see that we have the legend like this, where we have a polka dot, a light, and a dark. And that's all you have to do. So if you look at this, you'll see we have our focus, which is represented by that polka dot. Then we have a light and a dark. You always take the focus fabric out of the equation and you compare these two for the light and dark. And what happens whenever you then place your fabrics, it's perfect. Your focus fabric will end up in the biggest block, and then your light will be your background fabric that causes these other elements to pop.
That's awesome. So may I just
Sure.
reiterate that to see if I understand? So in our pattern, fabric number 1 is a polka dot, and that's what we're calling the focus fabric.
Correct.
Oh, that's awesome. So it always has the polka dot, which is like your focus, your fabric.
Like your print.
So, and then number 2 is the white color, and that would be the number 2 here.
Yes.
The green. And then the number 3 is the black color in the legend here, and that's the darkest one here.
Super simple.
It is, and you have placed them so perfectly in the pattern, so it's so easy to always have that great quilt in the end.
It takes a lot of guesswork out. It will not take you 6 hours to pick out the fabric like it did me for my first grown-up girl quilt. Okay, but once you've bought you've picked out your fabric, you're going to buy it. So there's some little tips and tricks and terminology about fabric you may need to know.
Yes. Real quick, can we tell them about this fabric that we're showing them in this kit number?
That's a good idea. Please do.
Yeah. So it looks like we have used our Park Place pattern for this particular quilt. That's what this one is, the Park Place. The number for the fabric kit is 8021439. The kit is called Cottage Bleu. And once again, the Park Place is an individual pattern, or it's also available in the Fast and Fun book.
And do you know the other thing that I didn't mention and how easy it is to enlarge? If you want to make a bigger quilt, you get 2 kits and you can make a twin, and 4 kits will make a king queen, and the books show you how to do that. So everyone has the instructions for that as well.
That makes it so simple.
The little one is just the the lap size. Okay, well, tell us about terminology for fabric. So when you're buying fabric and you start reading a pattern and you get WOF.
Oh, that's a really good question. I had to learn that one too. So I have a piece of fabric here. This is a 1 yard cut. And what we have is 2 different terms I want to cover here. The first one is the selvage. And the selvage is what the manufacturer has used whenever they actually make the fabric. So this is like the part that's on the loom, I guess you would say. There's one on this side and on the back side as well. Now this one is not as obvious, but it's certainly there. And you can see there's these little bitty dots in there, and you can see that's where it was attached.
And do you know what's really interesting is how much information there is here. So let me throw this in. I just thought of it. First of all, they will quite often have dots. In this case, they have butterflies to show the color. And that's a good way to match up your color if you're matching colors. The other thing is, if you buy a fabric and for some reason you want more of that fabric, a lot of the fabrics have the actual information, like this is a Moda fabric, and here's a stock number, and it's printed right on the selvage. So it's a perfect way to find replacement. And what would we do without Google?
Oh my goodness.
Because you can Google this and find it. So,
Right.
of course, first check with Fabric Cafe.
Of course. So that's a really good point, the color dots. And then one of the things that you might even think about doing is before you start your project, go ahead and get your phone and take a snapshot of each of your fabrics so you have those order numbers. And if you happen to run out or need a little extra, they're available.
And it's a whole lot easier for us, even though you might have that number. If you're looking for a replacement fabric, if you send us a picture, we're very visual. We might be able to help you a lot better.
That's a great idea too. So the selvage is this manufacturer part on the edge here. Normally this is cut off and it's not used in your quilt at all. So that is something to keep in mind. Now the next term is that WOF.
Yes.
Now that is an abbreviation for width of fabric. And basically what that means is the distance between selvages. So if I were to take this piece of fabric, we have a selvage on this end, and then if you opened it all the way up, unfolded it, we have another selvage on this end. So the width of fabric would be all the way across from selvage to selvage.
Now, I do want to point out that occasionally, when you first start quilting, you might accidentally confuse your width of fabric. It's basically 44-45 from selvage to selvage, but if you have a 1 yard piece, it's only 36 inches. And if you accidentally cut your pattern out of this one, it could cause a problem. So always make sure when you say width of fabric, you're going selvage to selvage, not end to end.
So I'm glad you said that, because I think it's helpful to show if you are a new quilter and you haven't done it, you're not cutting your strips this way. You're cutting them this way
Across.
off the end. So if you had a 3-inch strip, it would be right there.
That's right.
So now we have gone through our basic terms of fabric with the selvages and the width of fabric and all of that. Now let's talk about squares and rectangles and blocks and strip piecing and all of that stuff.
That sounds like a plan, because that's really where it starts getting into the eyes crossed and what are they talking about?
We're going to make this so simple.
All
You're going to
right.
be surprised.
So what quilt are we going to use?
I have an example here.
Okay.
This quilt is Garden Path, and this is also from our Fast and Fun book. And in this quilt, we are using a square here and an assembled block here. So let's put this on the table and I'll step through the difference of those, and I want to show you the kit for that. So we have our 3 fabrics here. Our focus fabric, also known as fabric number 1, and those little polka dots, this is such a gorgeous fabric. I have to stop and say that. I'm sorry. I'm just like drooling over this fabric.
It's like watercolor. It's gorgeous. Yes.
So, and it goes here, and this is a block that is cut in a squares, and I'll refer back to that in just a moment. And then our fabric 2 is our white in our guide in the pattern. It's our fabric number 2 is the lightest one, and it is used to build our assembled block, which is using strip piecing and units, so we'll cover that. And then our number 3 fabric is our darkest. It's represented as black on the pattern. It's in our border and as well as in our assembled block.
That's really cool. And you know, that's a constant with the polka dot one, the white
Yes.
and the black. It's a constant through all of our patterns. So we don't ever change that on. Once you get that, you got it.
Yes, very, very, very simple. Now the quilt information on this, let's give them that real quick because this is really gorgeous. The quilt information is 8021718. It is Beauty in Nature, and the pattern is Garden Path. It is available in the Fast and Fun book or as an individual pattern.
Let me take this over here so you can have the book.
So, as I mentioned a moment ago, we have squares and blocks. So, in the case of Garden Path, a square is basically a piece of fabric that is cut from a width of fabric, and the pattern will tell you the measurement. And basically, the square is going to be a finished piece. So it's not like you're going to be, okay, let me see if I can explain this right.
You're doing nothing else to it.
You're doing nothing else to it. Now, sometimes the square will be referred to as a block because it's in its finished state as it is on the Garden Path quilt. So if we were to cut this, and you can see we can lay it right up here, it is exactly this.
Well, you know, it's kind of nice whenever you cut a square and you're already through making the block.
It makes it so nice. Trust me, so
Yes.
nice. Now, also sometimes we'll have, instead of squares, we'll have rectangles. Now, it's the same basic concept, but instead of being equal sides on all 4 sides, 2 will be one measurement and the other 2 sides will be another measurement, basically making a rectangle. Could possibly also be called a block. Now, there are other blocks, and they can be assembled in different ways. If it's not a square or a rectangle, it could be assembled with strip piecing.
Now, this is a good place to talk about here, where it says, the very first step says, referring to strip assembly A diagram, and the fact that we've always bold it when there's something that you need to go look at. So you go over here to strip assembly A. So we have block B, we have row assembly, we have quilt assembly, but you look for that bolded area. It means go play hide and seek. And it's usually on the next page.
That is such a great tip to mention that, because I know if you've read our patterns in the past, or if you're about to read one, because I know you're going to want to order this, the bold is there's a diagram for that. So it's really helpful to know that, oh, it's bolded, so let me go check that out. So in a strip assembly, basically what that means is we're cutting a strip of fabric from selvage to selvage. Now let me look at this, and you can see here, I'm going to fold this in half. So we've cut this off of our big 1 yard piece of fabric. Our selvage is here, and then our selvage is here. And we've cut straight across. So we have one of those here.
Now, where do they find the measurements for this one?
Oh, well, thank you for asking.
So this is fabric 2.
So under fabric 2, we're going to be cutting 2 of these that are 6.5 inches by width of fabric for the strip assembly A.
And look, it's bolded again.
It's bolded again. So we can refer over here. Oh, well, the white is my number 2 fabric. So that's going to be my 6.5. And then it looks like it has a black as well, which would be the number 3 fabric. So we have cut to 3.5 inches by width of fabric for strip assembly A, once again bolded. So here it is here.
So this is really, the way the patterns are written really do make it simple.
It's so very simple. So in this case, we have our 6.5 from fabric 2, our 3.5 from fabric 3. It's just a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
And we're going to sew these together. And I think we have an example of this. Mom, do you have that over there?
Yes.
And this is what we have. And what's really cool is once you sew this together, you can see that it basically looks like the picture.
So true.
So it makes it really, really easy. Now, this is a strip assembly. From the strip assembly, usually we will cut a section off of the strip assembly and create a unit. So as you can see here in our picture strip assembly A, we've got our 3 and our 2 fabrics sewn together, just like here. And then we just basically cut off a unit A, and the instructions do tell you how big to do that. So basically we'll sew, cut into 24 3.5 by 9.5 unit A.
Oh, and it's bolded.
It is.
That means we got a picture somewhere.
I love that. So here, as you can see, I'm just going to set it side by side. It looks exactly the same. We've just taken our rotary cutter and cut off, and this creates a unit. Now, units are usually made from a strip assembly like this, and they're used to assemble a block.
Every once in a while, your instructions might tell you to cut a particular square that's smaller that needs to be added, and it might be called a unit by itself.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
And it'll just be a square. So sometimes a square is a block, and sometimes it might be a unit, but we will tell you and we will bold it so you can, it'll catch your attention.
And you know, every once in a while, I also know that units can be built with half square triangles, but maybe I'm complicating it at this point.
We're not going to talk about half square triangles today. Well, that's a show all to itself.
Oh, that would be a great show. Let us know if you'd like to see that too. So we have our unit here. And whenever we're creating our block for garden path, we have 2 units that are identical. We're going to take one and turn it upside down. You know what? I'm going to do this the other way so it looks just like the picture. So we have the same unit, but one is returned upside down. And then we have a rectangle. And we're going to sew those 3 together. And the combination of these sewn together creates the block.
Pretty simple.
It is so very simple.
Okay, so you're quilting along, and you can start off with some super simple patterns like we have on the free goodies tab. There are the easy beginner quilts. We have a whole list with pretty color pictures, so you can pick out a pattern that's super easy. But as you're quilting, it's going to get a little bit more complicated. None of our patterns are complicated, but the next one that we're going to show you actually has 3 different blocks that are put together. Now, when you look at it, it doesn't necessarily look like it's got 3 blocks, but let me show you how it works. So it's called tic-tac, and tic-tac follows the same basic rules of the focus fabric and then the light and the dark when you compare those two. So let's put tic-tac on the table and let's talk about the kit. This particular kit I'm extra partial to because it's from my fabric line, Enchanted Garden.
And it's so gorgeous. I love the coloring in this.
I do too. And it's going to be so much fun in this particular one. This is a great quilt when you have 2 focus fabrics, but one of them is lighter than the other. If you ever do the 2 focus fabrics, most of the time they're going to be separated by another color, by that 3rd color. So you don't have to have a whole lot of difference in these, but it makes it more interesting if you do.
I can see that.
Okay, so this is your fabric 1, 2, and 3, and the kit number is 8021849 Flower Patch. Tic-tac is the pattern. Easy Peasy is the book that pattern is from. Okay, let's talk about seam allowance. Now, anytime that you're making a quilt, you'll want to use a 1/4 inch. And a 1/4 inch is we've done this in a contrasting color, is the measurement between the edge of the fabric and the stitch line. Now, you might also hear the term scant 1/4 inch. Scant 1/4 inch just means it's 1 stitch length less than a 1/4 inch. And you can achieve that by bumping your needle 1 time.
Okay,
so it's pretty
awesome.
simple.
Yeah, that is simple.
I do recommend that you always do a little test swatch and stitch and make sure you measure to see if it is. The most important thing is that you always do your, you're always consistent with the size of the stitch, the
that makes
1/4
sense.
inch,
Right.
because it will change the dynamics of the quilt and the ease with putting it together. Now we have a strip piece here, and you can see it's selvage to selvage. Those are the widths of the fabric, and we've sewn those together and we've come up with this look. Now I do want to point out one more thing, that you always cut off one end. You want to cut those selvages off of one end, but leave it on the other. And this is not an uncommon thing that happens. I never have figured out exactly why, but from the same manufacturer, it might be a little bit different width. It's probably produced on a different machine or something.
Yeah.
But you will, what I would do is probably cut this off and leave this one and start cutting from that end.
Oh, that makes sense. I think I would do the same thing.
So this is a full strip assembly.
Right.
Now let's look at a partial strip assembly, because a partial strip assembly is just a portion. So I might give you a measurement that actually makes this a partial. It's not the full width of fabric. It's going to be a part of the width of fabric.
So you would say cut a certain measurement and it wouldn't be the full width. And do we do this because they're economy quilts and we're trying to get as much as we can out of the fabrics?
Normally what happens is that I will do this partial, and the other half I use it for some other piece or part.
Oh, perfect.
So I'll give
so we
you
use
those.
every little bit of our fabric?
We use every bit of it that we can. We basically use about 34 to 34 and a half inches of the 36 that comes in your yardage. I need the cropping tool too, because I want to show them how this is assembled. Now, on the pattern, you'll want to pay attention to this as well. On the pattern, this particular one is created in what is called a vertical row. That means we'll start at the top and go to the bottom and sew the blocks or the units together so that you have a nice big long piece.
That's a little different. Hadn't thought about that. So vertical rows instead of horizontal.
And there's a reason why I will do that sometimes. It's usually for the ease of assembly. Most of the time you do a horizontal row, but in this case, it's the ease of doing it, and I will show you how that works. First of all, we're going to crop this block so you can see when you do that strip assembly that we just showed you, you're going to end up cutting pieces like this and like this.
Okay.
So remember, it had the dark strip at the top and the bottom. Okay,
Right.
This is the unit that we cut for that. And if you start assembling from the top of your quilt, just as it shows you here, the next thing you have is a unit B. And remember that right before this segment, I explained to you that sometimes you'll cut a square and it's going to be referred to as a unit and not a block.
Oh, okay.
Perfect example. Because we cut a block over here in the number 2 fabric, and we referred to it as a unit B. So unit B is simply a square like this. Now a different quilt pattern might have you cut a square like this and you don't do anything else to it, so it's considered a block. We're going to sew that one right here. Then we repeat for the length. We have a repeat of this block. It will go next. And then look at this strip assembly. This strip assembly only has one side.
Oh, so
And that will actually finish off. So you make this strip assembly and this strip assembly, and that is going to finish it off with a unit C down here.
Oh, I get the 3 blocks now.
So isn't that cool?
That is cool. Okay, so this doesn't have, these are not bordered blocks the way whenever I looked at the quilt, that's what I thought it was.
Oh, you saw those borders.
So I'm thinking bordered block, typical. So what did we do from this point?
Well, in that case, you're going to make this strip assembly, and this is multi. I didn't have it out here for you to show, but this was actually an assembly that was big pieces, and then we cut little skinny pieces off of it like this.
Okay.
And what we're making here are the sashing strips. These are going to be sewn on your, well, let's do it right here, on the quilt. After you do that vertical row, you're going to sew this.
Okay.
And then you're going to sew another one over here. So you make these vertical rows, and then you put this one here, and you make more strip assembly. So you're actually going to make 4 of these sashing rows.
Okay, so a sashing strip is sort of like a really skinny block row, kind of. Does that make sense?
That's a good way to put it. It's almost like you made a vertical skinny row.
Okay,
Right.
okay, so it's just something that joins rows of blocks together.
Right. A sashing is just something that you're putting in between the larger blocks.
Okay, very interesting. I like how this is made.
Yeah, it is a fun one. And like I said, it kind of got a little bit more in depth, or no, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not more complicated, it's just more involved because you had more pieces in there.
Right. But this is really simple, and I can see why you put it together that way, because it would go so much faster when you're making it. Okay, so now we get to finish our quilt top off with borders, which I'm very excited about, and bindings.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at a quilt that we have here. So Natalie is holding up our In a Flash pattern, and this is another gorgeous one. I love this fabric. You can see our borders are here. This inner border would be referred to as border 1, and the outer border would be referred to as border 2. So let's put that up on the table, look at the fabric, and let me show you those borders. So first, let's just start out with our quilt is In a Flash, that's the pattern, and our focus fabric, or our number 1 fabric, same thing, is this gorgeous kind of mottled purple and blue and green and yummy. These are my favorite colors in the whole world together.
Mine too.
So that's number 1, and that would be in one of these bigger rectangle blocks here. And then the number 2 is our lightest of the 2 remaining. And then our number 3 is this beautiful dark green. The number for this fabric kit is 8021848. It is called Magic Dance. Ooh, I love that name. The pattern is called It's in a Flash, which is only available in our Quick as a Wink book. Our alternate pattern is It's a Snap. So let's talk about borders. So borders are basically cut. There is a measurement in the book for you. I'm going to just pull this over real quick so we can look at this. In this case, border number 1, we're going to cut 4 at 1.5 inches by width of fabric, which means selvage to selvage, for border number 1. Now, sometimes, because these are economy quilts, we need just a little bit more fabric. So what we do is we will cut an extension. Now, we made that term up, I think, for our own style, because they're economy quilts. We wanted to make sure that we could make them as large as possible and still get that border on
And we
there.
had to have a name, so we called it an extension because it was just a little bit more.
Just a little bit more. So in this case, what we have done is we've cut another strip. So here you see cut 1 at 1.5 by width of fabric. Now from this strip, we're going to cut 1 at 1.5 by 32 for a border extension, and the rest of it is going to be used as a binding extension. So let's start with the border extension.
You want to take the quilt? Thank you
Oh,
very
that would be
much.
helpful. Thank you. So I'm going to cut this. I'm going to have my selvage hang off the edge, so I'm not counting that. And I am going to go to my 32, line that up nice and straight, and just give that a quick cut. And then I am actually going to line this up on 0 again and take that selvage end off, since it's a little bit hard to see. That way I'm just extra careful that I don't sew that selvage end into my border extension.
Very good.
Okay.
Now, what are you going to do with that little extra piece there?
Well, I'm going to go back to my pattern. So it says from this one strip, I'm going to cut a border extension. So that's what I just cut. That was 1 by 32. Now from the remainder of the strip, which is this little piece here, I'm going to cut one piece that's 1 1/4 by 10 inches for my binding extension. Okay, so in that case, now I don't have to sit here and cut this. I think you get the idea. I would trim this down to 1 1/4 by 10. Now, when you do your borders and your binding, you're sewing all of these strips end to end.
Yes.
So these extensions would just be part of that long strip sewn end to end. So it makes it very simple. It's just extending that long.
And it does tell you in the written instructions that you're going to use all of the border strips and the extension.
And the extension, perfect, thank you. So it just makes it very simple, and You've got
Well,
plenty.
that is definitely the terminology simplified, and it was a lot of fun to do. And we know that it's going to help you when you get to one of those patterns and you go, oh my gosh, what in the world are they talking about?
And just don't forget that on our free goodies tab on the Fabric Cafe website, we do have our cheat sheet with our 3-yard quilt terminology, so you can download that for free. Oh, and there's some other good ones on there too, so kind of shop around on that free goodies tab.
Why don't we sound more educated? Instead of cheat sheet, let's call it the Cliff Notes.
That's true. I like to be sneaky.
Okay.
But there's also the 10 recommended patterns for beginners, which is also a great list. And then don't forget that we have many of our 3-yard quilt books online as well.
That's right. And there's 8 patterns, and every pattern is written for 2 different sizes.
Which is really
Oh, I'm
great.
sorry, 3 different sizes. Yes, that's right. Lap, twin, and king, queen.
Well, thank you so much. This was fun.
Yes, and if you like this tutorial, we hope that you'll continue to join us. And if you'd like to know when we post a new video, all you have to do is subscribe and click on the little bell, and we will send you a notification whenever we post a new video. So it's Donna Robertson.
And Fran Morgan.
Have a great day.